Why do you think she's using her HRH title, albeit in a private letter, and clinging on to her Sussex name rather than Markle?
Well, it's clearly social capital. I mean, I think that I'm sure her PA, uses it to ensure that she gets that top table at a restaurant. I mean, it will have a huge weight in America to have that kudos of still having that sort of royal aura around her, and it is hypocritical in my I'm sure, I don't know, I'm just surmising, but I'm sure she uses it a lot, because it is something of value, particularly in the social circle she moves in. And Katie and I were talking beforehand about this sort of constant question about whether or not the sort of image, the brand, if you want, of sort of Harry and Meghan is still perceived in a totally different way than it is in the Commonwealth, and it probably isn't now. I mean, they've overstayed their welcome. But, on one level, you can't have sort of, tweaked all those emotional sort of triggers and then go back privately to continue doing it. It's not a great look in my estimation.
I think it just poses, or just off the back of what Mark's saying, just a bit of a hypocrisy element, a big issue over, well, you've attacked this institution many times, most recently in a podcast, which we've just heard this week, and yet you want to retain all of the perks and privileges of being in that institution, which is, of course, the titles. Because I suppose if they are just Harry and Meghan Sussex, because that is her name. She's right to say she's not a Markle anymore. When you marry, most people take their husband's name, and that's what she's done. But she doesn't need to be using the HRH title. She doesn't really need to be using the Duchess of Sussex. But of course, that sets her aside from, everyone else, including top-list, A-list Hollywood celebrities. I just think that Andrew is, as you say, so toxic. I don't think there is any hope of a rehabilitation for him.
He is toxic. There's no way about it. And that, that interview was
a disaster.
The full stop. I mean,
the British royal family has always stood for tradition, honour and duty, but today, three names echo through the halls of controversy: Meghan, Harry and Prince Andrew. Each of them, in their own way, has stepped away from the firm. Yet none of them can quite let it go. They may claim independence, but make no mistake, they're all clinging on for status. Once you've tasted royal life, the spotlight never really dims for Meghan and Harry. Leaving the monarchy was supposed to bring freedom, but what they really wanted was fame, and the royal titles still open every door for Andrew. It's not freedom he's chasing, it's survival. And all three have one thing in common: they crave recognition more than redemption. When Meghan and Harry left the UK, they promised a fresh start, no royal protocol. No palace pressure. Just privacy and purpose, but their every move since has screamed the opposite. From Netflix documentaries to explosive interviews, they keep using the crown they claim to hate, because without the royal connection, their empire crumbles. They didn't abandon the monarchy, they tried to monarchize it. Then there's Prince Andrew, once the Queen's favourite son. Now a man disgraced, stripped of titles, and frozen out by his own family, yet even in shame, he refuses to disappear. Desperate for relevance, Andrew still dreams of a royal return, a fantasy that the palace and the public have firmly rejected. Meghan. Harry. Andrew. Three different scandals, one shared flaw: ego. They want the perks of royal life without the pressure, the fame without the service, the status without the sacrifice. And every time they claim they've moved on, they remind us exactly how desperate they are to stay connected to the crown. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the true royals carry on: King Charles, Queen Camilla, William, and Catherine. They've learned that real power isn't found in headlines, it's found in restraint. While the outsiders shout for attention, the firm's quiet dignity continues to win hearts. The truth is painfully simple: you can leave the palace, but you can't leave the crown. Meghan, Harry, and Andrew may live outside royal walls, but they're prisoners of their own obsession with prestige. They traded duty for drama, service for self-promotion, and now they're discovering the price of walking away from legacy is losing your place in history.
I think I described at the time it was like the equivalent of driving a clown car with a lit cigarette through a firework factory. It was just jaw-droppingly sort of deaf, in terms of, and blind in some ways to things around you. But
And yet we're 6 years on and it still hasn't recovered for Andrew. It's still, more
no,
getting worse
because
and
he
worse
keeps,
for the guy.
he keeps trying to edge his way back in.
He won't let go.
That's
in the same way that
problem.
Harry and Meghan won't let go of
Yeah.
those HRH titles, he just is clinging on. He needs to let go.
And as soon as you edge back in, it's a story.
I joined the Prince and Princess of Wales on their wedding anniversary, their 14th wedding anniversary. It wasn't weird. I wasn't in a room next to them with a cup by the wall or anything like that. But
well, they were in a very remote lodge, very
they were in a
deliberately,
very remote lodge.
as far away from the media as they could get.
It was really, really nice. And I just want to spend a little bit of time discussing some happiness. Because is it just nice to see two people clearly in love, clearly happy, having a whale of a time in a beautiful setting of the Isle of Mull?
Yeah, it's lovely. And I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a time when they've done something public on their wedding anniversary in the past. I mean, they usually choose to celebrate it, understandably, privately. And then when they realised that, this trip fell over their wedding anniversary, apparently they said to their aides, we're happy to go ahead with it. And obviously, getting away together, going to Scotland, which is very significant to them because, of course, it's where they met at St Andrews. It's a place they love. I mean, I'm told that they've been up to Scotland quite a few times while Kate's been, in her period of remission. It's somewhere that's very special to both of them. And they look, well, you were with them, but everything we saw in terms of the footage and the images, they looked so happy together. And it was an important trip for Catherine. It was her first away trip since her cancer diagnosis. Hopefully we're going to see, more of her travelling around the country and possibly even further afield. She looked wonderful, she looked healthy, she looked happy. They looked very, very in love. And I think, when you look at them together, it's a really important image that for the royal family at a time when it's been through a huge amount of flux and turbulence, and we've got a king who's living with cancer. These two are they're the bright hope for the House of Windsor.
Well,
they're the promise of the future.
For me, it was the happiness. It was the kind of joy, the kind of excitement that they bring to the royal family and bring to engagements that some of the other royals... I mean, you look at some of the footage of Harry and Meghan, for instance, when they're abroad in Colombia or when they're in Canada or just recently in New York, seem a bit glum, seem a bit down. This couple just bring it every time, bring their A game. We're talking about the way they looked. Princess of Wales I think she had a lighter... a hair highlight, do I call it?
Yeah, she looked like she'd had a few highlights put in her hair, and I liked the fact that they were twinning in tweed and very deliberately sort of dressed down, hiking boots on, out in the forest, meeting communities and children benefiting from those communities. It just felt very very authentic and doing the sorts of things that they love to do.
And that's exactly what I would say. We talked about the lack of authenticity, the artifice that surrounds Meghan and Harry. Here we have what I feel about it. They feel like they're in control. They feel that there is a balance between what they have to do and how they want to sort of ensure that their life, particularly for their family, is as real and as possible. So it felt honest if you're talking. It felt honest if you're talking about it, and I think that's what sort of comes out from this, and this is where people really connect with something now, particularly under the glare of modern media, that we can actually immediately feel there is something real about something. Where you look at this, you think, well, what's a game? What's the game the others are playing?
You immediately talk about the authenticity, and I remember just before the weekend, William was in Elephant and Castle in South London, and he went to a community centre. Have you seen the footage where William's walking down a pathway, and it's a long walk for the photographers to get the picture of William attending this event, long way down a path, and the security guards, there's a couple of barriers, and an incredible woman comes across. And if you've seen the footage, she comes across like shouting, calling out to William, gives him a big hug, said, it's the Prince, it's the Prince. And it's those little moments where you go, this isn't staged, this isn't PR, this is actually them kind of being their authentic selves.
Yeah. And very relatable as well. And, and I think you see that in the King as well. I I wonder if it sort of coincides with, and I think it does, with the death of the late Queen. And with that, I think, we're always going to have this moment of transition with the monarchy, but I think in so many ways, it feels more modern. It feels more relatable. And, you're right. You look at William and Kate and they look really happy. I mean, you and I have done enough of these royal tours. We know they're hard work. I'm sure you're knackered because the schedule is full on, right? But I've been away with you to the other side of the world with them, and they make these tours almost look like a second honeymoon. They look happy to be away. They're happy to be engaging with members of the public. And this is the first we've seen of them as a couple in, over a year now. And I think there's something very reassuring about that. They are a great partnership. They're a brilliant team. They're clearly very happy, and you know what? They're doing really good work. They've condensed and focused their work, their charitable initiatives, and you sort of feel like this is a couple on a mission. They're on a mission to do some really good, important work, and they're doing it.